Michaeline. I'm the brief recap. We've been doing these DareGreatly Space podcasts since October last year, so we usually do them Mondays and Wednesdays at 5 o'clock. So that's a lot of shows that we've got. We host them on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/liftport, and also on our Spotify channel. So take a look at, you're going to need to look for Dare Greatly Space on Spotify because there are other Dare Greatly shows on Spotify. What do we do? Well, we start out almost 20 years ago as part of the NASA Institute for Advanced Concepts research team on the space elevator. When that project ended, I created Liftport in 2003. Liftport grew pretty strong for a while. We focused on nanotechnology. We worked on material sciences. We got really good at robotics and working on the mechanical processes of climbing string. There was a real estate crash. I think you all know about that. My wealth came from real estate, and so when that changed everything, it changed the company as well. So we closed the first version of Liftport at that point. Fast forward to 2018, 17 and 18, we restarted the company, this time to focus on not the Earth elevator, but the lunar elevator. And we're very confident that we can build a lunar space elevator infrastructure now with current technology. And that's what we were working on. That's what we were doing 17, 18, 19, 20. When 2020 came around, the whole world changed quite a bit. And it looked pretty grim for us. We almost went out of business. And we wound up shifting and focusing on online conferences. The world was still going to conferences, so we hosted virtual meetups for 27 different conferences. And that was good. That worked out pretty well. When the pandemic shifted again, we shifted to doing these shows. We've been doing these shows for quite a while now. On Mondays and Wednesdays, we have our show, but then on Tuesdays, we do a show every other week for the Space Frontier Foundation and the Mars Society. So Space Frontier Foundation has their show, The Pioneers of Space Commercialization, and the Mars Society has their show, Red Planet Live. There are some big things happening there. These are not my secrets to tell, so I'm not going to share them. I just know that they're happening, so it's exciting. So definitely want to check that out, especially in the coming next couple weeks. The next couple Tuesdays should be pretty cool. I'm very excited about it. I can't even tell you what's going on or who's doing it, but I will tell you, you will want to get this. This is going to be big. There's some national news going to be breaking here. International news going to be breaking here. So pretty excited about that. What do we do on our shows? We kind of have three areas that we focus on. We focus on national policy, national and international policy. We focus on infrastructure, what's getting built up there in space, and why. And then we focus on the money. How much? What's getting spent? Who's spending it? So those are the three kind of big topics we always focus on. And then we do that in three different ways. We have guests, which is kind of our favorite way of doing a show. We've got some great guests coming up, so stick around for that. We do policy deep dives into a specific document, and we do news shows, a news wrap up. Today, we're going to do a little bit of news wrap up and also some policy stuff. We're going to take this into a slightly different direction than we usually do. I'm assuming everybody knows that there's been some pretty big news this week. That is kind of a bit of a game changer, a little bit of a game changer. So we're going to kind of talk about three things really, and try to put them into scope in the world. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get straight into it. Doing a screen share here. So this came across my desk, and as soon as I saw it, I'm like, oh, this is a big deal. It's not just a big deal that Axiom raises $350 million. Like, that's good, right? I want them to raise that kind of money. That says good things about the health of our industry. And people forget that, even Jim Bridenstine, the former NASA administrator, just a couple of days ago talked about how the world needs to do space exploration. And they absolutely do. The world does need to do space exploration, but also space development, space commercialization. And the world isn't really paying attention to the fact that there's the beginnings of an industrial revolution happening in space. And when a company can go ahead and raise $350 million, I don't know what that puts the valuation of their company at, but it's probably pretty big. So let me post some links here for a second. I just lost my page here. So what's the deal with this investment? Why is this a big deal? I'm going to read some pieces of it here. Well, Saudi Arabia is getting the headline from the imagery, but also South Korea. Saudi Arabia does not have a very strong space program in and of itself. Its neighbors do. United Arab Emirates has what I think is one of the strongest underappreciated Martian programs in the world. But Saudi Arabia is not really well known for its space program yet. But South Korea, in just the last year, has really, really upped its space game. And South Korea has been helping the United Arab Emirates for many years now. So that these two nations are coming together to build out arguably the leading space station company in the world. It's a pretty big deal. We already knew that South Korea had already funded Axiom. We learned that earlier in the year, and we talked about on our show. And I want to remind people, during December last year, we had 2 different Korean interns. Over the last 3 years, we've had nine Korean interns. So our connection with the Korean government is pretty strong these days. Um, uh, and I know for sure that one of them has gotten a job with the space program back home. So that's really exciting to see that starting to unfold. Um, but what does it mean for Axiom, right? So let's take a look at Axiom for a second. There's their website. They are, without reservation, I would argue that they are the strongest private space station company out there. Now, we know that there's the Orbital Reef program at Blue Origin, massively funded organization for obvious reasons, I think. Um, I'm a big fan of Nanoracks and their Starlab system. There are others in development. Last year we tracked 14 space agencies, space stations in one level of development or another. I want to point out some of the folks on the team at Axiom, former NASA former NASA. Oh, I forget what she did. Jesus, wow, I'm kind of forgetting that. Astronaut, four-star general of the Marine Corps, former NASA administrator. So when you have these kinds of people on your team, that says pretty good things about what you're trying to accomplish, right? It talks about credibility, who you can, what you're trying to accomplish. So $350 million to Axiom. So good for them. Congratulations. I'm curious to see what they're going to do with it. They don't really go into what their plan is. This is a part I want to pay attention to. I'm just going to go ahead and read it. Axiom has received $370 million in funded task orders for its contract to date, which the company says is a statement has a maximum value of $1.26 billion. Overall, Axiom has said it has more than $2.2 billion in customer contracts, but it did not include details about those contracts. The Series C round brings the total raised by Axiom to more than $505 million. That's their C round. So I don't know what they got on rounds pre-seed, seed, A, B. I don't know how much they've raised, but that is a lot. If you've got $2 billion in customer contracts and you've raised seeds of the 500 million range, you're doing fine. So curious to see where this goes, but exciting news. I think the age of commercial space stations is a bright one, and it's been one I've been following for a while. Okay, I'm going to change gears here for a second. I'm going to talk about something we don't usually talk about very much here on this show. I'm going to start talking a little bit about politics, and I'll bring it back to space as quick as I can, but just bear with me for a second. So I don't know if y'all are paying very close attention, but right now down in South Africa, there's an event. It's called the BRICS Summit. I'm posting a link here. Give me a second. This is the BRICS Summit. I'm just going to go ahead and read it. Members of the BRICS economic group of major and emerging economies are meeting this week in South Africa for a summit that could determine the future of the bloc and how hard it pushes back against a world order it sees as unfairly dominated by the West. The group of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa has never been more prominent on the world stage, but the BRICS themselves are complicated. Russia's leader, Putin, can't attend the summit because the host country, South Africa, would be obliged to arrest him for alleged war crimes. Two other members, India and China, have a simmering border conflict. And while Beijing is locked in rivalry with the United States, New Delhi has close ties to Washington. It is not the happiest of families. Well, that is an understatement. All right. So let's just kind of like think about that for a second. And then we're going to jump to another piece. I'm going to try and wrap this back into space as quick as I can. You just got to bear with me for a minute. Also at the meeting, China's leader was supposed to give a key speech that was specifically focused on the economy of the world, and it was supposed to, take some shots at the United States. Quote, peppered with thinly veiled swipes of the United States that have become a fixture of Xi's international speeches. In the statement, Xi called for the world to avoid sleepwalking into the abyss of a new Cold War. Without directly mentioning the U.S., the statement said, quote, some countries obsessed with maintaining its homogeny has gone out of its way to cripple the emerging markets and developing countries. All right, so why are we talking about BRICS? Why are we talking about Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa? Well, because they all have space programs. They have really significant space programs. This week, two of those space programs tried landing on the moon, one successfully and one not successfully. And one of these programs already has a functioning robot on the moon and has for several years now. We all know that China's got a functioning robot on the far side of the moon. India's been operating with a probe for many years. India was a necessary instrumental partner with NASA on the discovery of water ice on the moon. That was more than 10 years ago. South Africa's space agency and Brazil's space agency are primarily focused on what I call real estate management. It's observation satellites. They have giant pieces of real estate, and they want to make managing that real estate easier for the citizenship of their nations, right? They have both of those countries have not figurative, but literal Stone Age level tribes that they are managing, as well as 21st century, mega cities. So the needs of these countries for space is actually really well demonstrated. So South Africa and Brazil have very strong space programs. We're going to talk more about Russia here in a minute, Russia and India in a moment. But very arguably, these five nations represent a very distinct path for the future of space. Okay, so just kind of think about that for a minute, in relationship to each other and in relationship with uh, the United States, with Europe, and their efforts to go to space for our efforts to go to space. Um, and then think about what we just talked about, Korea and Saudi Arabia, and I threw in United Arab Emirates. These space programs are real and they're doing vitally important work. And sometimes they work together, and most times they don't work together. Uh, Sometimes there's a real rivalry here. So this is the stage that we're in. This is how we operate space in the 21st